Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Super Sunday here on Apex Racing TV and part 2 of the Weekend Warriors, that being the Spec Racer Fords. My name is Ron Mons, alongside me in the commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall, our old friend Luis Araya. Today we're at the Land Down Under Winton Raceway in Australia. It's an old school track that's about as flat as a pancake, which is somewhat new to many of these drivers that will be racing with us here this afternoon. It's just become base content in the past few seasons. I think it may have been last season or the season before. It's fairly new to a lot of these drivers. It's also new to Charles and I, as this is our first ever broadcast here at this track. And now, Charles, we've been sitting here in this iRacing session for a little bit, just looking at these drivers haul the mail around these corners and try and negotiate this very technical racetrack. So what are your initial thoughts, just what you've seen so far?
Yeah, it's an interesting layout. There's a couple of sections that are a little technical. Obviously, we'll talk about it a little later with turn 7, 8, and 9, the triple hairpin that they're going to have to negotiate. But there's a lot of good long straightaways as well. So that's going to make things pretty tight. You'll have the nice draft line and be able to make some passes, hopefully. It's going to be obviously a very tricky section. 1 and 2 is basically a chicane at the end of the front straight, as we see here with Marco Pinero. So yeah, it's one of those that you're going to be really hard on the brakes, trying to get slowed up to make the chicane work, and there might be some issues there during the course of the race. So it's going to be interesting as we talk about this a little further, exactly how drivers are going to attack this circuit.
I think this track is really a blend of many things that we've seen so far this season, as we have a beautiful shot cutting away of Jason Green going off the track that was exiting turn number 4. But as I just said, this track has a blend of many things that we've seen all throughout this season. We've had a varied schedule of races that we've had to contest with ever since March 17th, when this season started off at Summit Point. Then we went to Zandvoort, the Nordschleife. That was a fantastic race. I wish I was a part of that broadcast. Sadly, I was with my family on Easter that day. Then we went to New Hampshire on the Roval there, VIR on the North Layout, Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, Rudskogen, Belle Isle, Phoenix a couple weeks ago, which was absolutely probably the most tricky race that we've seen from any of the ones that we've had so far this season. Then we went to Mid-Ohio, which was a total slipstream fest last time out. We're at Winton today, and we're going to round off the season in 1 week's time at Watkins Glen. But I think before we get into talking about the many challenges around this racetrack, I think we should probably touch on the points, because we only have one more race to go before the runoffs, that being Watkins Glen in 1 week's time. We have some pretty interesting championship stories. Here's the standings in Spec 1. It's Joao well. Tabino, the Brazilian, leading that in the number 50 car, 817 points on the board for him. It's a pretty good gap between himself and Jason Green in P number 2. Then Evandro Dantas in 3rd, Marco Panero, the Italian, in 4th, and Dudu Castro is going to round out your top 5 in the S1 category. Then moving on to Spec 2, I think it's a different story in that category, much closer. As you can see, Philip Berry, the Australian, has hometown advantage coming into this race, a driver of the 888 cars at 527 points. Pedro Carvalho there in P number 2, Paul Jackson in 3rd, Wilson Brazarosco in P number 4 in that 444 car, and yet again Paolo Breme in the 555 cars in P number 5 in that Spec 2 category. And now we can move on to your favorite class, Charles, that being the Masters.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom Gradwell still leading the Masters, 494 points. Kurt Nunez is only about 15 points back in second. Cathcart is now even on points, but apparently Nunez has a better top finish. So Cathcart is now in 3rd, Jeff Fritcher in 4th. York Monty rounds out the top 5, and Jim Brewster's only 1 point back in 6th. So still pretty tight down in the lower portions of the podium, but still it's actually pretty tight at top as well. So it's these last 2 races are going to be premium as far as finishing positions. So you got to be smart and be aggressive at the same time, and hopefully we'll be able to crown a champion at the end of next week, but still lots to play for.
There's a lot to play for, and what a track to do it at as well. I mentioned in my open that this track is new to many of us here in the world of iRacing. Not a whole lot of people bought it back when you had to pay for this track to actually drive on it, but now that's part-based content. It's getting a lot more use, and we're seeing Antonio Reese use the pit lane. I was going to mention that they're kind of talking about how this circuit is a blend of many things. It has the obscurity of the Legacy Phoenix road course that we visited a couple weeks ago. It has those long flat-out blasts that we saw at tracks like Canadian Tire Motorsports Park with the Mario Andretti straightaway. It has a pit entry very similar to Rudskogen. It also has the wide, expansive runoff areas that we haven't seen from this series, that being the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors, but we did see from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors at Snetterton a few weeks ago. That track has a whole lot of runoff area, and really this track as well, just looking at the stuff surrounding it, it's really tricky. Me personally, I can't make heads or tails of it, part of the very good reason why I'm usually behind a microphone instead of behind the wheel. There's just so much stuff to try and keep into consideration at this track. Those fairly long straightaways, they're going to be slipstream. It's going to be slipstream central, especially going down that start-finish straightaway at the very beginning and very end of the race. We could see a photo finish. We'll just have to wait and see. So, Charles, we talked about our expectations heading into this race, but I'll ask you this here real quick. What do you think of this track, just generally speaking?
So we're gonna talk about the other Australian tracks not named Mount Panorama. So it's very open layout, very much like Phillip Island, not as much elevation, but it's kind of flat as we would see with Sandown, which we did come to last season. Not a lot of elevation change there, so it's kind of a combination of both of those tracks. Obviously, Phillip Island's I think a more flowy track, not as many hard cornering opportunities there. It's just a lot of slipstreaming there, but obviously a little bit more elevation than we're seeing here. So it's a very interesting combination. There's little similarities with other Aussie tracks, but in the end, it's its own animal. And so these drivers are going to have their work cut out for them because, like you said, I've never been here. You've never been here as far as broadcasting. Never even raced here. So it's kind of a new thing to me, and it is for a lot of the drivers as well because it's a little used track. Even though it's free content now, it still hasn't really been in iRacing service for, I don't think, more than a year or so. So it'll be one of those that these guys will be practicing hard, getting everything ready, and trying to put on a good show for us for the next 40 minutes or so.
I think the buzzword of the day is, without a question or shadow of a doubt, the word curveball. We're going to be using that a lot throughout this broadcast because that's really what this race is going to be. Coming to the end of the season, a lot of drivers are going to try and push that envelope just a little bit more and try and be a bit more aggressive. They're definitely pushing the envelope here in this qualifying session. This is Marco Pinero, P2, as things stand currently at a 127.440. He's a little bit farther back of our current provisional pole sitter, that being Joao Tabino, in that number 50 car. This is Jason Green and P number 3. It's a top 3 composed entirely of Spec 1 drivers. Jörg Mani in 4th, which is a little bit different from how we've seen the past few weeks. It's been a little while since we last saw Jörg Mani actually attempt to qualify for these races. I think at a track like this, where we do have those slipstream opportunities, with how tricky this first few corners of this race are going to be, particularly that chicane to open up the lap, I think starting at the back or starting in the midfield is more or less going to be a death sentence for a heck of a lot of these drivers.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you want to be as far up in the field as you can be, because if you look at the our current qualifying results, the highest rated Spec 2 drivers in 11th, and that's Carvalho. We see this a lot with more technical tracks or little used tracks. It's the experience pays off, so these higher rated drivers that are in the Spec 1 category tend to do better, and you see more of a gap. You don't have Spec 2 guys up battling for overall podiums or race wins in the wet, as we've seen with Formula 4 this season. So as we see Carvalho now up to P7, so it's a good jump for him. So he's obviously done some work to get prepared for this. But yeah, overall, you see when we get to these, like I said, these little used tracks, you tend to see a bigger disparity between Spec 1 and Spec 2, and it's not from ability, it's just from experience.
And here's Megan Overstreet. She is one of the most experienced drivers here in the Weekend Warriors series. We haven't seen too much of her throughout this season, as she had work commitments that took her out of the sim rig and had to get her out of the office throughout a vast majority of that. But now she's here racing with us. The summer approaching, she's getting more time off on Sundays, and she chooses to have her time with us here this afternoon. Always nice to see Megan Overstreet out on circuit. She's currently P16 here in this qualifying session. I may need to get my glasses prescription changed a little bit, which is a bit concerning considering I just got done a few months ago. Ooh. The checkered flag, as Megan Overstreet goes for a spin. That's a tricky corner as well. That's in the very tight, twisty, and complicated midfield section. Specifically, that was heading into turn number 7. That was a Penrite corner right before a rollover corner. We're kind of joking towards the end of last week's broadcast and before this one as well. We're going to see if any drivers trying to live up to the name of that corner. For their sakes, I hope not, but as a broadcaster, I'll be impartial to the fact that we may see a rollover at rollover corner.
Yeah, it's I think it's named that for a reason. I don't think it's we talked about this as well, pre-broadcast, is the people who kind of ran Winton did a lot of good job with their naming rights. So you'll hear a lot of names being called out for corner names and straightaways and things like that for advertising purposes. But yeah, rollover seems like it's pretty specific for a reason. So it's a little sharp, and it's not a very difficult corner. It's a little sharp right-hander after that long arcing turn 5. It's just a quick change of direction, so that might have something to do with it, especially if you're fighting too wide.
Alrighty, well, here is the starting grid for this race we have coming up for you today. Joao Tabino is going to be leading them to green, a pretty good time of 1:27.204. He's a little bit ahead of Marco Pinero, who will join him on the front row. Yanqi Lin, who won earlier on this afternoon in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors at Long Beach, he's going to be starting this race in 3rd. Jason Green in P number 4. That's Jörg Mani in 5th. Chris Murakami in 6th, making up an all-Masters row number 3. Pedro Carvalho with a very underrated, it must be said, qualifying performance. P7 is very good for a Spec 2 driver. That's going to help him out quite a lot if he can hold on to that position between now and the checkered flag. And then rounding out that row, joining Pedro Carvalho on that 4th row, is going to be Jeff Frischer. Then we have Bobby West in P9, Christian Kabanka in P number 10, Simon Mayer, who won in Canadian Tire earlier on this season, in P number 11, Antonio Reese, one of the Masters drivers, in P number 12. Then just scroll down a little bit, we have Tom Gradwell, the Australian, on hometown soil. He's got to be in P13, Avenger Dantas in 14th. Andrea Favini, the Swedish driver in the number 27 car, he will be starting this race in 15th. And Megan Overstreet will round out your top 16.
Yeah, starting in 17th is Josh Justice, Flavio Andalo in 18th, Philip Berry in 19th, Jeb Jacobson is in 20th, Josh Wilkie 21st, Brad Cathcart 22nd, Chad McNeese, new driver, looks like he's going to be Spec 2 in 23rd, Gianni Longan in 24th, Paul Jackson in 25th, Russ Telker in 26th, Adam Bradshaw 27th, 28th is Michelle Viglini, Wayne Buttermore in 29th, and Bob Kern rounds out your 30-car grid.
So it looks like we're going to have 30 starters. Actually, that may be a little bit tentative. I think Flavio Andalo has actually dropped out of the session. He may be suffering from a slight connection issue here. That would not be ideal for him to start off this race from the pits. But you mentioned a few moments ago we have a whole pace lap here before we grab the green. Actually, do we? I think we have a half pace lap, so I may have to make this quick. You mentioned the wonderful corners that we have and all the sponsors sponsoring the corners at this racetrack. And hey, this broadcast and this series and these fantastic races would not be possible if it weren't for the fantastic sponsor that we've had ever since throughout the second half of this season, that being Personal Wealth Solutions. Just like in racing, financial planning and investments require a team behind and experience as well. Personal Wealth Solutions creates custom investment and financial planning strategies for select individuals and businesses as well. With over 25 years of experience, their goal is not to have you feel like a number, but make you feel like they're number one. If you'd like to learn more about financial planning run by racers serving racers, head on over to www.personalwealthsolutions.com. We'd like to thank Personal Wealth Solutions for being a proud partner of the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors and the Ray Esports Series as well. And speaking of this race, it's a pretty disorganized start, but the green flag is out and the drivers are on their way. That was a disastrous start for Marco Panera. It's looking to be a beautiful start for Yanchi Lin. He may try and go around the outside into turn number one, try and get the move done on Joao Tabino, was not close enough heading into the brakes. This is tricky. Going through turn number one, it's very narrow, and you also have that killer curb on the outside. It's a rocky outcrop disguised as a curb with some red and white paint, but they all went through that section fairly clean. Kerbanka, right as I said that, I think Jason Green may have had some kind of moment. He was very slow exiting turn number three. The drivers trying to negotiate this first lap as cleanly as they can. They're coming up to rollover corner, so fingers crossed for their sakes that we don't see a driver actually roll over in rollover corner. This track is more of a one of two halves because you can overtake in that second half with those long straightaways and flat out blasts, but in this first half it's more of a game of survival. They're negotiating this top section of the circuit, turns 7, 8, and 9. It feels like never-ending hairpins that these drivers have to deal with, and if they go off into the dirt, their tires are going to be coated and they are going to drop down like a rock. But I think so far everyone has negotiated this lap one clean. We're following Brad Cathcart, who's a final driver in the top 20, and right as I say that, I think that was Wayne Buttermore going for a spin farther in the back. I think Bob Kern may have been involved in that as well. If not, I think actually Bob Kern did not take the start. I think it may have been Andalo, the S1 driver, that was the other half of this Wayne Buttermore incident in turn number 9. But surprisingly surprising considering the nature of this track, they all negotiated lap 1 mostly clean.
Yeah, it was mostly clean. We have a couple of drivers up and down as Flavio Andalo is down 10 spots. Looks like he's already pitted. Seem right, but anyway, I'm just kind of watching the timing and scoring. Not sure that's accurate or not, but it's fine. Maybe he was up. Maybe he pit started the race as he was trying to get back in. I think that was the issue, right? Was he got kicked kind of early or just before the start? As we see 32, that is Dantas.
Yeah, that is.
Yep. He's off the track, so he's recovering and he's down a few positions as well. So he's going to have some work to do to make up. But yeah, overall, pretty good start for, like I said, an unused track. They've, Josh Justice around.
Yeah, that's a massive spin, smoke screening the rest of the field. Thankfully, he reverses out of the track and out of the way of his competitors without any further incident. I think, that was our buddy Josh Wilkie that went off the track as well. That was some light rally action in that small little stretch between turns 7 and 8. I think he got away with that fairly clean. We may have to take a look at some replays to see a lot of stuff that we saw during that first lap. This may have been our buddy Josh Wilkie. It kind of feels always a bit iffy trying to show replays of Josh, mainly because the next broadcast that me and Charles always do with him is, he was another spinner in that incident with Justice. Made a little bit of contact with Brad Cathcart. Don't want to slander him too much because he's going to be our producer for the Ray Esports broadcast this upcoming Tuesday. But yeah, just a quick little spin, nothing too serious. And this was a first one. That's Josh Justice. He's an SRF driver in real life was running quite well right behind Megan Overstreet, and just a quick little spin heading into turn number 7. Not ideal, but he managed to recover it fairly smooth.
Whoa, that was close. It's just very end of that replay as a car just narrowly missed, and that might have been Favini that just kind of darted in front of him. But yeah, it was a good, I say a good, it was a collision avoidance by Josh. He was actually trying to make a move on the inside, right behind where Justice spun. And it was just collision avoidance. I think the car on the outside maybe kind of bunched him up a bit. And so he had to take off track. But we're back to live action as we're back up to the front of the field with Tabino leading, Lynn and Pinero in third.
They're tracking some pretty good lap times right now. Tabino currently has the fastest at a 127.690. They're starting to pull away. However, York Monty is still within striking distance in P at number 4. We're not seeing the packs that we usually see develop when it comes to the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors races, mainly because this track is a lot more tight, twisty, and technical than we've seen all throughout the rest of the season. Jeff Forscher is holding on to that final top 5 position in P2 in that Masters category. He may be feeling some pressure from Jason Green in the not too distant future, and Pedro Carvalho is still putting on a pretty good race running in P7, 10 spots ahead of his S2 adversary, that being Barry down in P17. So as you can see with this graphic change, the field is still fairly close. It's just a massive pack from P5 all the way back, but up towards the very front of the field, we're seeing those front 3 of Tabino, Lynn, and Pinero start to pull away a little bit from York Monty.
Yeah, they've just managed to get themselves a little bit of a gap, and they're starting to stretch that lead out. And then Monty's kind of by himself. He's got about a second and a half on both sides. And then, as you said, you've still got that big train from P5 all the way back, seemingly down to P12 and Antonio Reese. So, yeah, it's still, early yet. The packs will come and go as we get more and more fights for positions through the corners. And it's just one of those. It's another one of those that it's because it's a little used track, unfamiliar to these drivers. Probably taking a little bit easy, trying to make hard moves. If you want to see hard moves made on a track, wait till next week. We go to Watkins Glen. That's going to be a fantastic race as we see Telker off.
I think that was just a simple spin. Gotta take a look at the replay to see what happened there. I will say Andre Favini, who is running solidly inside the top 15, briefly disappeared from our screen. Some encounters of a third kind continuing here from this season of the Weekend Warriors series, and just ran incredibly wide heading through the hairpin of turn at number 9. I will say that is a very easy mistake to make. It's surprisingly tight heading through that corner, so just sadly for Russell Tekler. Quick low off there, thought the corner was a little bit wider and he could carry a bit more speed on exit. This track, again, I guess another driver suffering the pain that I felt driving around this track, as we have a battle between Paul Jackson and Josh Justice with a big smoke screen from Andallo farther in the back. Thankfully, no one's going to get caught out by the smoke screen he laid heading through turn number 1. But getting back to that incident with Tekler, that is a very similar moment to what I had when I was driving around this track and what I've had driving in my experience around this circuit. I can make heads or tails of it myself. I think it's mainly down to the fact that there's not a whole lot of reference points if you were these drivers.
Yeah, I think that's got something to do with it as well. It doesn't look like there's not a lot of brake markers, so it's experience is going to come into play. And yeah, you get to a place like that and you're just ready to get back on that straightaway after doing those 3 hairpins, and maybe just a little bit eager back on throttle and just pushed out wide, as these cars tend to do. They're a little understeery, especially when you get on the throttle. So just it's going to be one of those that he'll make that mistake a couple of times. He'll get used to the cornering and how to get on the brakes and then back on the throttle, and they'll get that sorted out with no further issues.
Joao Tabino is certainly getting it sorted. He is still leading this race over Yanchi Lin in P2 and Marco Pinero in P3, but Yanchi Lin is very close. A gap between those two, less than 0.2 of a second as they go through the hairpin. I think we may have had some alts farther in the back. I see Dantas and Cathcart down pit lane. That would be exceedingly early for these drivers to come into the pits. Usually we see that pit window open once we hit that 10-minute barrier, so I think there may have been a little bit of contact. They had to tow back to the pits, or a very bewildering strategy call from those two we'll just have to wait and see how they shake out compared to the rest of the field. And it looked like Lin was maybe trying to size up a move heading down the inside of turn number 7. Yanxi Lin is feeling incredibly racy right now. Yanxi, he always gets very good fuel numbers. We heard this from York Monty when we had a chat with him at the end of the Formula 4 Weekend Warriors broadcast earlier on this afternoon. Yanxi has like a strange ability whereby he can just push these cars to the absolute limit and still hit the fuel numbers that he needs. So maybe Yanxi Lin is like, hey, my fuel numbers are too good. I want to try and burn some gas, and I'm sick and tired of seeing Joao Tabino's number 50 car run from me. So it looks like Yanxi Lin is feeling incredibly racy.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise you. I mean, Yanxi is a really, really proficient driver in all the what we would call the SCCA cars, and just always puts on a almost a clinic. Just if you watch him, his lines are very precise. He knows where to make the moves, and I think that's what he's doing now. He's kind of sizing up Tabino and figuring out where he's going to be able to make a pass. So he's looking down to the inside, and it says not yet. So he's waiting for that good run, maybe a mistake by Tabino in front to make that pass that much easier. But yeah, he'll be doing that, just harassing them the whole time. And Pinero, obviously multi-time champion here in the series. He's always fast when he's on the track. So we'll be watching both these guys and see if Tabino can hold them off.
And as it seems currently, they are continuing to pull away from Yorgmani and P at number 4. He leads in the Masters category with Pedro Carvalho leading in the Spec 2, coming up to the 10-minute mark in about 15 seconds time. So we're seeing this race continue to develop. We're seeing these drivers possibly take it a little bit easy. They're eyeing the pit stop soon, because as I said a few moments ago, once we hit that 10-minute barrier, that's when that pit window opens. I'm kind of split on what kind of strategies we may see these drivers take. I'm sure Joao Tabino, Yanxi Lin, and Marco Panera are going to come into the pits at roughly the same time. But if you're Yorgmani running effectively in no man's land at this stage of the race, quite a long ways in front of this man, Jason Green, running in the final top 5 position, but also running a little bit farther off that front 3 trio, would you try and go for a different off-the-wall strategy if you were Yorgmani, or do you think you're going to be content with the position you're running in, leading in that Masters category, and trying not to be overly ambitious when it comes to the strategy in this race?
I don't know. This track, I'm not sure. I mean, I think there are places to make passes, but I don't know how conducive it is to actually make it, doing an undercut and working your way through traffic. I don't know that that's probably if that's a sound strategy or not. I think I think somebody will try that. I don't know that it'll be Monty or not. Monty, I know, likes to run till the very end if at all possible. Jason Green as well. All these guys up front, as a matter of fact, they're going to run it till the tank's dry. You may see one come in a lap early. But yeah, the 2 cars that came in earlier, Dantas and Cathcart, it kind of feels like it was at the 8-minute mark, and it kind of feels like that might be the beginning of the pit window. Because there is enough technical section of this track where they're not on throttle, on full throttle, most of the lap. So it may be that they can stretch the fuel out to 32 minutes. So we'll see.
What's really tricky about kind of predicting the strategy content of this race is we've lost our yardstick usually in these races. Ooh, and that was contact between Andallo coming out of the turn at 9 hairpin along with Bradshaw. That was a pretty significant whack. It looked like a NASCAR bump and run heading through the hairpin of turn at number 9. But getting back to the point I was going to mention, we've lost our yardstick because usually Maurizio Nazelli just puts on an overtaking clinic in these races. If there are overtaking opportunities, Maurizio Nazelli usually uses them to full effect, especially on lap 1. We've seen him pull off like 40 overtakes so far this season, particularly the New Hampshire road course race earlier on this season springs to mind when I think of that. But when it comes to off-the-wall strategies, one of the drivers that benefited the most from that was a man running right in front of Antonio Reese, that being Simon Mayer. I mentioned earlier on when we were going through the starting grid that Mayer used a weird strategy to fantastic and brilliant effect a couple weeks ago at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, was the last driver to come down pit road, and we were thinking, oh yeah, he's going to struggle to remain inside the top 10, but no, he got in front of the leaders and managed to exit out fairly smooth. So Simon Mayer could be the driver that tries to stretch his legs the farthest of any of these drivers.
Yeah, it's very possible. He may try and fuel save. He's sitting right behind Kabanka. So it may be that I'm just going to ride behind somebody. If Reese passes me, then he passes me, and I'll ride behind him as well, and just try and stretch that fuel number for as long as I can. And then hopefully the cars that already make their pit stop start battling, and I can kind of stay out front. And that worked for him at CTMP. And I'm sure somebody be thinking that as well. Like I said, somebody will make that. And you talked about Naselli not being here. Normally it would be Stevie Ray would be our first. When Stevie comes into pits, we say pits are open for business, and Stevie's not with us again this week as well. So it's another one of our, pit stop guys that we always look for as markers for these races.
Well, I think we can kind of make assumptions as to what these drivers will do. It's very tricky to get into the mind of a racer, and considering I drove for as long as I did throughout my so far fairly short life, it's not a good place to be in the mind of a racer. I can say that with the utmost confidence in the world. So we're coming up to the 14-minute mark of this race, and I'm curious, Luis, could we possibly pull up the track map graphic to see roughly where the cars are out on track? Because we saw some incidents earlier on, and I think with that, the field has spread out a little bit. So if you're this man, Joao Tabino, and you come into the pits, I think you would probably slot into that window between the P21 runner of Adam Bradshaw and our P22 runner of Josh Wilkie. That's a small little window, but besides that, it's pretty much it's like a traffic jam. Besides the small little gap between Panero and Monty, from Monty all the way back to P at number 23, it is a madhouse, a lap traffic, and just traffic generally when it comes to for these drivers to come down pit lane. That is going to be a big factor.
It is, and I think you're right. I think he would come out around that P21 mark, and they would be able to get by Bradshaw, I think, pretty quick. But then the next problem is you've got a group of cars in front that are still kind of fighting each other. So then it becomes, okay, now how do I get past these next 3 or 4? And that's where that starts running into problems, because just looking at the lap times, these guys out front are about a second a lap faster. So you would be up in traffic in a big way, in a hurry. And I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not sure the undercut's the right call, but we'll get a good indicator, I think, Andalo, because of his early stop, as well as Dantas and Cathcart. Dantas especially, because he's usually one of those guys that runs up front. Maybe he's just a little unfamiliar track, did not have a good qualifying. So it would be interesting to see where everybody is in relation to him. He should start working his way up the grid with some decent lap times. He's just got by Cathcart now, so we'll see if he can make up some progress and how that all works once the lead cars start coming into pit.
All of those drivers just overtook Michel Vaglini, who came into the pits not very long ago. So that was one of the first drivers we've seen come into the pits from the top 25 without any further incident. And we are in that window where we expect to see a heck of a lot of pit stops. 16 minutes in, 24 left to go, as I think Frischer has come into the pits. Yes, he has. So the driver that was running in the podium positions at that Masters category has pulled down into pit lane. It's a tricky pit entry as well. You can see that chicane right after they start that pit lane speed limiter. So it's going to be tricky on pit exit as well as pit entry. That pit entry very similar to what we saw a couple weeks ago at Rudskoken. That called out a few drivers. It certainly called out me whenever I drive around Rudskoken. And then you have that pit exit, which that's got to be a fairly terrifying experience around this track, being stuck on the inside of turn number 1. Of the many challenges of this course, Charles, do you think the pit entry and pit exit is probably the hardest?
I think that's got something to do with it. Yeah, for sure. It's as you said, it's not a straight in pit entry. There is a 9-degree corner that you have to navigate and a little chicane, and then pit exit is right into the racing line, kind of like Willow Springs. If people saw us, we see the 319 car parked, just letting cars go through. That was nicely done. And well played, and that was Vaglini just letting the lead cars pass and just trying to stay out of everybody's way. So yeah, the pit exit is a harrowing experience because you're trying to get up to speed as the cars are coming by full steam. If they're still battling, then you may end up having cars side by side trying to look for that move into turn 1, and which will makes everybody's life a little more difficult.
And we saw Michel Vaglini there, stopped on the side of the road. Before they came into the pits, they were running, I believe, up 4 spots from where they started And at this track, you mentioned a few moments ago, Charles, that it's a little bit tricky to overtake at a track like this with no disproportionately long straightaways in its entirety of the 1.86 miles that we find ourselves racing on this afternoon. I'm looking at my live timing screen, and currently Chad McNeese, the newcomer, running in P number 17, has made up the most positions of anyone, up 6. And yeah, that's I heard tire squealing going on as I was on a different screen, so I thought there was some sort of big accident that I just missed. Vivini's dropping down the running order, so not sure what happened to Vivini. Maybe a small little technical issue yet again. Oh yeah, I think they're having some small little technical issues. And I think we're going to take a look at a replay to see what happened to Andre Vivini. This may have been a mistake.
Whoa.
Oh my God! Okay, that's coming out of turn number 2, and oh, that's a big hit on the inside wall. Wow, that was a very quick succession of incidents there. Andre Favini hitting that rocky outcrop on the outside of turn number 2. I think it was a matter of when, not if, that someone was going to hit that, Charles.
I mean, it's almost like he just ran over a cheese grater on the outside there. It was just, I mean, he obviously had some damage on the front of his car prior to that, but then just runs wide coming out of turn 2. And those curbs out there are absolutely deadly. I wasn't expecting that. And yeah, the car got airborne. Obviously, no control from that point forward. And then he's slamming him into the inside wall. And yeah, that's one of those that you just kind of shake your head and say, all right, let me back up and take it back into the pits, or just run it the way it is. But my guess is that car will not be nice to drive from this point on.
I gotta imagine that his spine was reduced to the matter of white dwarf stars there. That was a pretty significant whack, and these Spec Racer Fords, they do have suspension, but it's not like an off-road truck or anything like that, so that bump was definitely felt if this was in real life. We got some battling here between Frister and our old buddy Josh Wilkie. Wilkie not really fighting off that too hard, heading through the turn 1 and 2 chicane, and be careful, Jeff. Oh my God. Every single time I see a car go through that section, I am going to have terrible anxiety just seeing them get so close to that outside curb. Even if it's like a matter of like 5 or 6 feet, I think that's still too close after seeing Favini and his aerial acrobatics heading through there. That, I mean, in my time covering the Weekend Warriors series, ever since I started back in March of this year, I've seen some strange things, but that's up there. Charles, you've been with this series much longer than I have, so was that kind of like up in your top 10 or top 5 of the weirdest moments you've ever seen?
That's got to be in the top 5. I mean, we've seen some strange things. I mean, we started off the season with the car just basically a slow speed rollover at VIR in turn 1, and then that was a lot of air by that car. And so yeah, it's just crazy. It's going to be one of those that we'll have to keep an eye on as we get closer and closer. These battles start heating up toward the end of this race. You may see somebody else out there before it's all over with.
There's still a whole lot left to be decided in this race. We're just over the halfway mark now, 19 minutes left on the clock, and we have a whole lot of stuff that's going to happen right after this. I have 2 screens going on right now. The Indianapolis 500, which has been rain delayed for about 4 hours as McNeese is dropping back. Oh, not the old commentator's jinx again. I was just mentioning how he is up 6 spots from where he started. Maybe Chad McNeese dropping back. That would not be ideal for him. Running down in P17, just got overtaken by Andallo and Justice. So Josh Justice putting on a pretty good show, and McNeese still up 6 spots from where he started, so pretty good. And again, that order that we see right now, Tabino, Panero, Monty, and Green making up your top 5, and the rest of the drivers that you see in the top 25, that's probably going to be turned on its head between now and the end of this. We still haven't seen a vast majority of the field come in for their pit stops, but I'm feeling pretty good about Joao Tabino as he's pulled out a pretty good lead over Yanchi Lin in P number 2 as York Monty gets a move done. I think that was actually him and Jason Green battling hard heading into the second to last corner of turn at number 11. But still, those pit stops, I think, are going to be critical in this race. That is going to make or break this meeting for many of these drivers.
I think you're right. I think we see it week in and week out where somebody, one of the front runners, makes a mistake in the pits, whether they just take too much fuel or not enough fuel, or they speed coming in or speed going out. So it's going to be one of those, and it's one of those critical things. But it's for these drivers. The official series doesn't have a fuel stop. It's a 20-minute race. They have plenty of fuel that lasts them for the entire event. And so they come in here and you don't have any practice. So you just have to know the car and know what your fuel numbers are and prep for it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
So we're seeing a lot of the drivers running a little bit farther towards the back. Wayne Buttermore is one of them, running in P26 right now, making very close, and it was nearly contact heading through turn number 9. That nearly, I think that was Jorgmani that he nearly touched. So lap traffic becoming a factor in this race. Once again, over halfway through, less than 17 minutes left on the clock, and a heck of a lot left to be decided. Andre Favini, who's dropped back like a rock, running down in P27 after that major off, heading through turn at number 2. Now trying to make up a position around the outside of Wayne Buttermore. Oh, they make contact heading through the second to last corner, and that's Andre Favini around. Wayne Buttermore very lucky to keep that running in a straight line, but there's a bad spot for Favini. He nearly got T-boned with a car coming into the pits. That was Christian Gabanka that nearly T-boned Andre Favini on the entry to pit lane. We're going to take a look at a replay to see that incredibly close call. This was a shave more than anything else, and whoo, okay, so it wasn't as close as it looked like from our first perspective, but definitely way too close for comfort if you're either Kabanka or Favini.
Yeah, but good job by Favini of keeping an eye on his relative and knowing the cars that were coming, keeping an eye out to make sure that he had clear track before he pulled out, or that would have been a major T-bone and Kabanka would have just broke that car in half as he was coming into the pits at full speed. So great job by Favini to at least be, after that incident with Buttermore, let's just be, keeping his eye out and making sure that he was not going to cause further incident.
We're seeing this storyline continue to develop at the north end of the field. The gap between Joao Tabino and Yanqi Lin, which not very long ago was about 0.2 of a second, is now 2.2 seconds. This is a pretty big, a vast yawning chasm developing between Joao Tabino and Yanqi Lin. I wonder what's happened here, because Lin and Tabino were fairly evenly matched pace-wise not very long ago. Maybe there was some sort of mistake for Lin and Panero that's dropped them back. Maybe Tabino has just been kicking on the afterburners as we approach the second half of this race that we are in now. So it's a little bit confusing there. I'll take a look at my live timing screen. Actually, I'll let you do this, Charles. How were they looking lap time wise last time by? Was it fairly close, or was there?
Yeah,
what's happened here?
Yeah, the last couple of laps they were within a tenth of each other. Actually, Lin was faster that lap by a tenth. Tabino was faster last lap by a tenth. So it makes me think that maybe Lin maybe picked up a slowdown somewhere. I'm not really sure, or just made a mistake through one of the corners and lost some time, or he's trying to play some fuel strategy, but it's allowed Tabino to get that 2-second lead, and he's managing to make the most of it. So and Panero not putting any pressure on Lin. Looks like he's content to just ride behind and save fuel as well. So he's trying to get ready for that pit stop at the end of this, and hopefully make it shorter than anybody else's and put him out at front. But they've got to make up a little bit of time now. Obviously, that gap's opened up, but it looks like it's starting to close just ever so slightly. Lin is starting to make up a little bit of that stagger, just a tenth at a time.
One thing to keep in mind as well between that fight between Tabino, Lin, and Panero, pit stops, again, going to be huge. We're going to see these drivers come into the pits in the not-too-distant future, definitely within the next 10 minutes of this race. We're following Antonio Reese, who's broken his way into the top 10, running in P number 9, maybe trying to size up a move on Simon Mayer, heading through the final few corners on this lap. And Bobby West has now come in. He was running inside the top 10. He is now ducked into pit lane. So Bobby West, one of the first drivers inside the top 10 to duck into the pits. I think that is going to start. It's slowly becoming a trickle. I think it's going to become a flood very, very soon. This track doesn't burn too much fuel, but they will have to pit at some point. Maybe with 10 minutes left to go on the clock, that's the time to do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they're going to wait till the very last possible instant to come in and just say, let's make this pit stop as short as we can make it, take on as little fuel as possible, and get back out there. Somebody will gamble, I'm sure. Somebody will say, I think we're going to get, another 5 laps or so. And somebody will say, no, it's going to be 4. So they'll take about a second and a half or so less fuel than the others. And that may be the difference if it works in their favor.
still have about 13 more like 12 and a half minutes left to go in this race, and a heck of a lot of pit stops to contend with. We're riding on board with Josh Justice very close to the back of Jeff Jacobson, heading through that tricky section of turn number 5, 6, and 7. Then you head through the hairpin, the never-ending hairpin farm at the very north end of this track. Actually, I'm not sure if it's the north end or the south end or the east end or the west end. I'm not very good with my Australian geography, but regardless of what cardinal direction it is, at the top end of the circuit is a hairpin farm, but then you have that small little flat out blast before you head into turn number 10, which I thought was going to be an overtaking opportunity for plenty of these drivers heading into this race. It hasn't really materialized that way. Pit stops and pit strategy is proving to be the main factor that's helping these drivers try and gain position.
Yeah, just haven't really seen a lot of passing pretty much anywhere except for as they're pitting. I think the coming out of maybe 1 and 2 seems like or going into 1 and 2 and out of 1 and 2 seems to be the best places to make moves as they're negotiating that chicane. So yeah, it's been a pretty straightforward race as far as that's concerned. And so yeah, pit stops playing a role, which they do most of the time anyway. Sometimes it's a little more subtle than other times, but it seems like there's always something crucial that happens during the pit cycle that changes the course of the race.
That is a very good point there, Charles. We've seen it in some of the radical broadcasts that we've done occasionally on Sundays here on Apex, with drivers not clicking off, changing certain tires, as I see some very strange cloud formations forming in the skybox here on iRacing. Panero has come in along with Joao Tabino, so Yanshi Lin is going to inherit the lead of the race, and Joao Tabino is spun on pit entry. Joao Tabino, who looked like he was going to have a dominant win here, has spun on pit entry. That is going to cost him big time. Right as I was mentioning how these pit stops throw some sort of curveball towards these drivers. We just saw it right now. The leader of the race leading comfortably. Did he clip that inside barrier? Was it just clipping that grass on the outside that helped him spin around? Either way, Joao Tabino having to pull off a 3-point turn to go back down pit road. That is crushing for Joao Tabino. That is going to hurt him quite a lot. It's going to help Marco Panero quite a lot there as he just buzzed by him. So that is a massive time loss for Joao Tabino, probably around the 5, maybe even a 10-second time loss for Joao Tabino. That is huge.
That is huge. And yeah, he missed the barrier, but just too much speed, could not carry himself around the corner, got in the grass and looped the car around. And I hate to say that was a commentator's curse because we weren't really referring to him directly, but
it definitely was.
we talk about pit stops every week. Somebody makes a crucial mistake where they either take too much fuel or not enough fuel, or they make them an error on pit entry, something like that, or speeding or something else. And it's just, we see it week in and week out, and those are the little mistakes that ends up costing you potentially a victory.
And Yanshi Lin continuing to stay at as we see a fight between Barry and Jackson for this would be P3 in that Spec 2 category. Pedro Carvalho, as things stand currently, yet to come down pit road, is in P3. That is an almighty result for the driver of the 336 car. If he holds on to that, or even if he stays in the top 10, that would be a huge result compared to this man, Philip Barry, who is just barely inside the top 20 and put off a nice move earlier on past Paul Jackson to move into P19. And our old buddy Josh Wilkie running in 16th. I shouldn't have said anything. It's going to be another commentator's jinx here. Jeff Jacobson's in P number 10. And as we see Josh Justice come down pit lane. So Jeff Jacobson is going to get that monkey off his back very, very briefly. However, he has the leader who's running very, very angry after that simple little mistake on pit entry. Joao Tabino is going to be a man on a mission, and he needs to be a man on a mission because with the amount of time that he lost with that spin and that small little moment coming down into the pits, Joao Tabino is going to he's going to have to drive like a bat out of hell if he wants to have any sort of hope of winning this race.
For sure. He's just going to have to be hot lapping for the rest of the race to even hope to get back up. It may just drop out of the top 5 before it's, just may have cost him that much time. So, yeah, I'm sure that after the race is over with, he'll probably be kicking himself for that seemingly, pretty innocuous move, just coming into the pits and making that little error. So, but now he's obviously kind of hung up behind Jacobson here, just looking for a way around. But he's being very patient. He could have gave him the fiberglass horn there, to make his way through, but he's biding his time, is waiting for the right time to make a pass. He doesn't want to interrupt somebody else's race.
Joao Tabino surprisingly patient, but also very annoyed under the helmet. And we're seeing Yanchi Lin along with Jason Green have come down pit road along with Gradwell. So 3 more drivers coming down pit lane. We'll see how Lin exits out. I think he is well ahead. Oh, and Tabino goes for another spin. This time around the final corner, and he gets T-boned by Jorg Mani. Oh, that was that's... I'm trying to save my words, but that was a pretty desperate and frankly asinine rejoin if you're Joao Tabino. He was seeing his chances of this race win disappear right in front of his eyes. That spin on pit entry didn't help him out one bit, and that just killed it. So we're following Jorg Mani, riding on board with him. Jorg, he has got to be furious with Joao Tabino. That is absolutely uncalled. That's unnecessary for Joao Tabino. You can understand his frustration. He's seeing his chances of a race win disappear. He's trying to gun for the championship, and he's trying to get a win in the dying stages of the season. But, well, it's given the lead of the Masters category to Antonio Reis. Jorg Mani, if we go back to this point, we've mentioned it all throughout this season. If Jorg Mani didn't have bad luck, he would have no luck at all. That is...
Yeah.
I'm going to save my words because I think I've said my piece on that. Charles, what do you think of that rejoin, and maybe trying to use some more PC language compared to what I said?
Well, as being a team manager, I always tell my team guys when we're doing a race, I said, don't make a mistake trying to correct another mistake. And that's exactly what happened there. Tabino, I think, was trying to make up the time. He was trying to set his car up for a run down the straightaway to make that move around. Just kind of lost it, got a little flustered, back on the throttle to try and get the car turned around, and Monty was there. And yeah, I hate it for Jorg because it's been that kind of season for him, as it looks like the car may be dying. He's really slow, not really sure what's going on. It may be terminal at this point, so he's just slowly working his way around the track. And you hate to see it because Jorg's such a fun guy. When we interview him, always a nice guy, good guy to talk to, and is a really good driver. So you hate to see it when things like that happen. And I hate to see it for anybody, the other driver as well. Sorry, I just lost the name there. Yeah, Tabino. So you hate to see it for him because he was having a good race, and once again, you're trying to overdo things to try and make up for something that happened before. And that's what gets you in trouble, and that's exactly what happened there.
That was just so unfortunate. Simon Mayer, in all that chaos, briefly inherited the lead of the race. However, he's now come in with less than 5 minutes left to go on the clock. Joao Tabino, bless his heart, he's still running out there. I'm sure both him and Monty's car has been crumpled up like a Pepsi can underneath a semi-truck's wheel. Yanchi Lin and all that chaos, it looks like he's going to be on his way to a fairly dominant win as he's leading over Simon Mayer currently, and Pinero has now inherited that P2 spot, currently about 6 seconds, separating those two. Hey, we're expecting these pit stops to prove very, very crucial in terms of who is going to win this race, who's going to finish in the podium, and who is going to win in all of our classes. And we saw it put on full display there in probably the most unfortunate way, but hey, it's racing. These drivers giving it everything they absolutely can, and sometimes mistakes do happen. This is Bobby West, who's one of the first drivers running inside the top 10 to come down pit lane. He's now running in a pretty impressive P5. That would be a nice result for him, along with Pedro Carvalho, who in all that chaos has inherited 4th. Has he come into the pits? I believe Pedro Carvalho has come into the pits, so this would be a fantastic result for Pedro if he can hold on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he started in P7. A good starting position, was the highest, by a wide margin, the highest position Spec 2 guy, and has just had a really good race. Hasn't really done anything overly dramatic, but he's just been consistent, and that's what you need in a race like this.
To finish first you have to finish. I've definitely read that in a fortune cookie before, and we saw some drivers, especially the man Joao Tabino, who had led from start to finish before he decided to go for a doom trip down pit lane. He led throughout a vast majority of it, but sadly for him, it is all gone to naught. Jorg Mani is still out there on track. I'm not sure if he's just running out there out of protest and protest alone, because that car is it's been reduced to a hoopty rod. He is going about a tenth of the speed of everyone else. Yorgmani, will he come into the pits this time by? But I think I see a broken wheel on that car. No, he is still staying out. Interesting call from Yorgmani. I know if I was officiating this race, as I do for the Rickman Tech races, which I probably shouldn't have said after that quote involving Joao Tabino. Oh, I think he stopped.
There we go.
Yorgmani has finally come into the pits. I think he just decided to do a few more laps and call it quits. Maybe what he was doing is just assuring that he would finish ahead some of the drivers that dropped out earlier on. Joao Tabino has also left the session as well, so he's going to be relegated well outside the top 20. But yeah, man, mixed feelings coming into the final 2 laps. I think, are we on 2 to go, or I think we may be on 3 to go? It's borderline. We have 2 minutes left to go on the clock. A lot of thoughts after this race. We have a whole lot to talk about once the checkered flag comes out in about 2 minutes time.
Yeah, I think you're right. But yeah, it's we've had some Josh Justice a little wide there. That was taking as much of the track and then some. Yeah, it's obviously it's been some really good racing, but hang on a second. How did this happen? How did we get
what in the world?
3 tenths together? All right, let me see the lap times as they come around here. I'm going to say Yangshi obviously had a very, very off lap, or Marco Pinero has added a 5-liter V8 to his car. No, 34.29 last lap for Glenn. So now we're a battle for the win here on the last lap.
This is going to be tense. They are on the white flag. We only have about 9 corners left to go to round off this race. Lynn in P1, Pinero in P2. They've run up towards the front throughout a vast majority of this race, but now they're going to be trading blows, breaking out elbows, and probably punching each other to get the win in the second to last round of the season. Can Yanshi Lin pull it off and get 2 Weekend Warriors wins in the single day? Will Pinero play spoiler and end up on the top step of the podium? We don't have a whole lot of time left to go. They're rounding through turn number 8 right now. They're about to head into the hairpin, the tricky hairpin of turn number 9. There's only 2 heavy braking opportunities left to go in 3 corners after this one. Yan Shilin is leading them out of that turn number 9 for the final time, as about a half-second lead. That gap deteriorating, though. It closed by about a tenth of a second going down that straightaway, and Pinero closed it up again as well. However, he did not have a good exit going on to this second to last straightaway of the lap, onto the Falcon straightaway for the final time before they go into turn 11 and 12. Lin needs to hit his marks and keep it clean. If he picks up a slowdown, he's going to be in trouble, but it looks like he keeps it in within the white lines, and Yanshi Lin is going to pull off the double here on this Sunday, May 26th, to win at Winton. I nearly forgot the name of the track. He wins here for the second to last round of the Ray esports season. Marco Pinero ends up in P number 2. Jason Green, all things considered, he is going to be very happy with that P3 run that he just put together. Pedro Carvalho, another fantastic run from the Portuguese driver. He's going to end up in 4th. That is a great performance for that S2 driver. And it looks like Bobby West is going to round at the top 5. And wow, Charles, that was absolutely intense from start to finish. But a pretty good finish, it must be said.
Yeah, for sure. It was a lot closer than we thought about 2 laps ago. Lynn obviously just made a mistake somewhere on the track and lost a few seconds. Enabled Pinero to get close, but unable to make the pass. So great drive by Yangshi. Marco, obviously, he'll be maybe satisfied with the P2, maybe not. But yeah, Carvalho, great job. P4 overall, first in class, and Jeff Richard I think he was the guy that did the undercut, and it worked to his advantage and ended up winning the Masters class.
They were just waiting for a few more drivers to cross the start-finish line, and I will not spoil what's going on in real life, but it was a very interesting start for the 108th running of the Indianapolis 500, and I will leave it at that. For spoilers' sakes, Wayne Buttermore is going to be one of the last drivers to take the checkered flag. Michelle Viglini ends up in P24, stopped on the outside of, I think that is turn number 5, if I'm not mistaken. There was pretty much no reference points in terms of trying to figure out where we are on the track. So I think all the cars have taken the checkered flag, and we'll run through the results here very quickly before we wrap things up this afternoon. And taking the victory in a very dramatic turn of events is Yanshi Lin. He won in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors earlier on this afternoon. He wins in the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors here as well. Marco Pinero, the Italian, ends up in a somewhat shocking P2 as well. Jason Green is going to be very excited. He's going to be ecstatic about that P3 run. Pedro Carvalho, another driver, incredibly happy with how his race went. The Spec 2 driver ends up in 4th, Bobby West in 5th, Simon Mayer in 6th, Jeff Frister in P number 7 wins in that Masters category, Antonio Reese in P number 8 second in the Masters category, Christian Kabanka, who I don't think we talked about throughout a vast majority of that broadcast, he ends up in P number 9. Megan Overstreet will round out your top 10. Chris Murakami in 11th, Tom Gradwell in 12th, Josh Justice, a real-life Spec Racer 4 driver, ends up in P13, Philip Berry in 14th, and Jeff Jacobson will round out your top 15.
Yeah, Flavio Andalo in 16th, Brad Cathcart in 17th, Josh Wilkie in P18, Gianni Longan and Chad McNeese round out your top 20, Andrea Favini 21st, Paul Jackson 22nd, Wayne Buttermore 23rd, Michelle Viglini 24th, Joao Tabino in 25th, York Monty 26th, Adam Bradshaw 27th, Evandro Dantas in 28th, Russ Telker in 29th, and Bob Kern is your 30th and final finisher. Actually did not take the start. So that is your full field.
So those are your results from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race, round 11 of this season. We only have one more to go, and then we'll be heading off for the runoffs at the beginning of June. Well, we will be in the beginning of June next time out at the Glen. That is going to be an intense race from start to finish. Slipstream Fest for sure, but exciting racing nevertheless. We've got that coming up in a week's time. We've also got the Ray Esports season finale for season 11 of their 2024 spring tour, well, season 11 for the series history, and it's a 2024 spring tour. Gotta get the terminology correctly here on this broadcast. That's going to be a good race also at the Glen, so you better stay tuned for some Watkins Glen action here on Apex Racing TV coming up this week. And now, Charles, we both know that the Glen is going to be a slipstream fest, so I think, considering the Indy 500 is going on right now, I think we'll try and talk about something else other than the stuff going on here on Apex Racing TV, which is absolutely fantastic, might I add. Who do you think, who's your pick to win this year's Indy 500?
Obviously the Penske cars were pretty dominant in qualifying. I put my money literally and figuratively on Castro Neves. I want the 5th one. I want the one for the thumb. Obviously a great driver and has been there and done it over and over again. So if experience counts for anything, he'll be up toward the front at the end of that race.
I think that would be a fantastic storyline if Elio Castroneves ends up winning it. There's some great stories as well. Larson attempting to do the double, which, considering the rain delay that may be affecting the Coca-Cola 600 tonight, it looks like he may be able to do that even after the 4-hour delay for the Indy 500. My money's on another McLaren man, that being Alexander Rossi, won back in 2016. I have a very good feeling about it. Those Penske's have been dominant. However, Rossi, he has the willpower of a crazy person, and willpower, one of those Penske's that may be up towards the front of the field. But here for the Weekend Warrior Series from the Ray Esports Racing League on this Sunday, May 26th, the greatest day in racing, even with some races that may be delayed until tomorrow on Monday. I think that'll do it here for this broadcast. I think I'd be remiss without mentioning that tomorrow is Memorial Day here in the U.S., so we can pay tribute to our fallen soldiers that have died doing what we love. We couldn't be here putting on these great races if it weren't for them serving this country and doing it honorably. Charles, I know that you're a veteran, and trust me, your service to the country is just as appreciated as everyone else's. So I think for this broadcast, that will do it. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bachot joining me in the commentary booth, and Luis Araya doing a fantastic job working all the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so much for watching. Enjoy your Memorial Day festivities and watching the 108th running of the Indy 500, and we'll see you all again when the Weekend Warrior Series returns in 1 week's time.